Can you just explain to us a bit of what the California Medical Board has been doing? Like, what is it that you're having issues with that they're doing?
Okay, let me start from the beginning, all right? Give the readers a complete picture of what happened. In July 2021, the Federation of State Medical Boards, which is the trade group for medical boards, issued a press release. It wasn't a white paper, it wasn't some thought out thing, they just issued a couple paragraph press release. And what they said is, look, doctors who knock the vaccine and promote off-label COVID drugs like ivermectin or HCQ should have their licenses revoked or disciplined. So that's what they said. We're the Federation of State Medical Boards. Our members are all the medical boards around the country, and we think that these medical boards should go after doctors who go out in public and spread what they call COVID misinformation. So they did that in July, and then what happened as a result of that, some states, or a few states anyway, like California, introduced legislation effectuating the Federation's policy. So in California, what they did is they introduced a bill that basically said if you spread what they call COVID misinformation, a doctor can be disciplined. The target of the bill were the doctors who were going around on the internet and in public knocking the vaccine, the safety and efficacy of the vaccine, promoting these off-label drugs in public, and the effect of which the basically the people in support of all these COVID edicts were taking the position that these doctors were drowning out the message of the public health authorities, and they were increasing what they call vaccine hesitancy. So this bill in California, carrying out the Federation's policy, was trying to stop doctors from going out in public and saying things that would make it less likely that people would take the COVID vaccine or the second, third, fourth, or semi-annual booster. So that was the target of the bill. And that was back in February. And then what happened is it became very clear very quickly to the legislatures that you can't stop doctors from speaking out in public. I mean, that's just, everyone understands that to be unconstitutional. So what they tried to do to save the bill was they tried to limit the information to information provided for the purposes of treatment or advice between a doctor and a patient, in the hopes that that would basically avoid the constitutional argument or the obvious constitutional problem. Now the board has already taken the position they don't even need this law. They can sanction doctors for their public speech. They can sanction doctors for their private speech to patients, even without this law. But they figure, well, you know what? Let's make it clear that we can do it. So that's their position. In any event, they always had their right to do it, which I don't think they did. But right now, the bill in California, the law in California, as of January 1st, is that doctors can be sanctioned for speaking out against the mainstream COVID media, or that's how we interpret the bill.
Well, I think this raises a few questions. I want to dig into these.
Sure.
One of the issues you said is that it raises that they try to get around the constitutional argument by saying that basically if a doctor gives advice to a patient, that's okay. But I assume that means that if they, for example, post something on Twitter, they consider that not okay. Can you explain this?
Well, like I say, I mean, the point of the bill was to stop doctors from speaking out in public, because they said it stopped herd immunity, because you have to have 95% of people to get vaccinated and boosted. And so it was really the public problem they were trying to address, but they had to give that up. So the way the law reads now is, law reads now is it's completely ineffective to do what the law was supposed to do, which was to stop these doctors from drowning out the public health authorities. And the notion that you can do that by targeting doctors in their individual in their examination rooms by what they say to individual patients. I mean, that's just not a good fit. It's more like they had to gut the bill, but they kept on promoting the bill as targeting the public information that doctors said. So when you say, when you had some confusion about whether does it still affect public information, technically no, but that's what the legislature was really worried about and continued to be worried about even after the law was changed to knock out the whole public aspect. And that's part of the confusion, is that there's just a disconnect between the problem, right, which is, Simone Gold, Joe Mercola, and all Sherry Tenpenny, all of these so-called anti-vax docs that were having a dramatic effect on the dialogue, which was negating or undercutting the Anthony Fauci and Paul Offit and all these guys who were trying to get people, or at least back then, were trying to get people to take every vaccine and every booster. Interestingly, Paul Offit, who is Mr. Vaccine, is now getting very reluctant to recommend all these boosters for a lot of reasons. But that is the whole target of the bill, which, and this is really our point in court, is that target is not being addressed in the bill because it is limited and had to be limited to patients because of constitutional consideration. So I guess our point is, what's the point, right? And under constitutional law, a bill has to be a reasonable fit to the problem the bill seeks to address, right? And there's a concept called under-inclusiveness. And here's the crazy thing about it. This bill targets physicians, medical doctors and osteopaths. There are plenty of other people who talk about vaccines, chiropractors, licensed and unlicensed, naturopaths. And the bigger problem is what has happened in the pandemic, and this is going to be a big part of our case. What's happened in the pandemic is that the concept, you don't need to go to a doctor to get a vaccine anymore. If you want a vaccine and you think it's, the bee's knees, you go to your local pharmacy, right? I mean, everyone's got a Walmart or a pharmacy or a Target, whatever. You go to a grocery store that has a pharmacy. So what's happened is, if you want a vaccine, you go to a pharmacy or some other place. But if you really have concerns about whether you should take that 12th booster, you might want to go to a doctor and get some information. And the board's problem in this case, and why I think we have a pretty good chance, is that even in California, which is pretty restrictive, the courts have held that information about things, even which violates the so-called standard of care, is still protected and can't be reached. So from a legal point of view, it's very questionable whether the board has the power to discipline doctors, basically censor doctors from providing information that patients would like to hear about. So that's kind of where we are and why we are somewhat confident that even in California, we might get a favorable result.